In 1985, a diver drifting over the seafloor off the coast of Florida looked down and saw something that shouldn't exist, a reef, but not made of coral, made of silver. Bar after bar after bar, stacked in the sand like a collapsed brick wall, stretching out into the gloom. One diver said it looked like loaves of bread laid across the ocean floor. Except every single one was solid silver, sitting there untouched for 363 years. It was worth around $450 million. To this day, one of the greatest treasures ever pulled from the sea. And the man who found it, for 16 years, almost everyone told him he was insane. He went broke, he got sued, and the ocean he loved took the most precious thing he had. His name was Mel Fisher. And this is the story of the treasure that cost him everything. So who was this guy? Mel Fisher was born in Indiana in 1922. As a kid, he read Treasure Island, the pirates, the maps, the buried gold, and something in his brain just locked on. He never got over it. But Mel wasn't some reckless dreamer with no skills. He trained as a hydraulic engineer and served in the Army Corps of Engineers in World War II. He understood machines, water, and pressure, which would matter enormously later. After the war, he moved to California and, believe it or not, became a chicken farmer. But the treasure bug never let go. He opened one of the very first scuba shops in the state, back when breathing underwater was still a strange new idea. And he married the perfect partner in crime, a woman named Dolores, Deo, who once set a world record staying underwater for over 3 hours on a single hose. She dived beside Mel for the rest of his life. In 1962, Mel met a treasure hunter working a cluster of sunken Spanish ships off Florida. Mel made an insane bet. He packed up Deo and their 4 kids, moved across the country, and agreed to hunt treasure for a full year and for no salary. For 360 straight days, they found nothing. Imagine dragging your whole family across the country on a promise and coming up empty for almost a year. But remember, Mel was an engineer, so he built something, a device his crew nicknamed the mailbox, a big metal elbow that bent the boat's propeller wash straight down. Instead of stirring up sand, it blasted the sand away, digging down to whatever was hiding beneath. They fired it up, and when the water cleared, the ocean floor was carpeted in gold coins. That was the moment Mel Fisher stopped being a chicken farmer forever. And from then on, every morning, no matter how broke or beaten down he was, he'd grin at his crew and say, "Today's the day." Soon Mel set his sights on the ultimate prize, a ship he'd whisper like a prayer, the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, Our Lady of Atocha. To understand why she mattered, go back to 1622. Spain ran the richest pipeline of wealth in human history. Deep in the mountains of what's now Bolivia and Colombia, laborers dug out staggering amounts of silver, gold, and emeralds, which were shipped back across the Atlantic to fund the empire. The Atocha was one of the heavy hitters, a royal galleon so loaded it took 2 full months just to record and load all her treasure. Silver bars by the thousand, chests of coins, gold, and a fortune in Colombian emeralds. She was so important she sailed at the back as the armed guard, the ship trusted to protect everyone else's riches. On September 4, 1622, the fleet left Havana for Spain, already 6 weeks behind schedule. In the age of sail, being late in hurricane season was a death sentence. 2 days out, a hurricane slammed into the fleet off the Florida Keys. The Atocha never had a chance. The storm drove her onto a reef and tore her open, and she sank in about 55 feet of water. Of the 265 people aboard, only 5 survived, clinging to the broken stump of a mast until rescue came. The Spanish came back for years, dragging the water with hooks, desperate to recover the cargo. They never found her. A second hurricane scattered the wreck even further, and eventually Spain gave up. The Atocha became a legend, the one that got away. And for over 300 years, she sat in the sand, waiting. For most people, hunting a ship that had eluded the entire Spanish Empire was fantasy. Mel treated it like a research project. He hired researchers to dig through the ancient Spanish archives in Seville. Actual 350-year-old cargo manifests and ship logs recording exactly what the Atocha carried and roughly where she was lost. Mel wasn't diving randomly. He was hunting a ghost with a paper trail. Even so, the search area was miles of open water, and the wreck was scattered and buried. So the crew followed what they called the trail. A coin here, a musket ball there, a chunk of ballast stone. Breadcrumbs, each one whispering that the mother lode was somewhere close. Then, in 1973, the breakthrough that proved Mel wasn't crazy. His divers brought up 3 silver bars. When they checked the tally numbers stamped into the metal against that 350-year-old manifest from Seville, they matched. Exactly. That was the proof. This was the Atocha. She was real, and the greatest treasure in the sea was somewhere just beyond his fingertips. The crew was electric. And in 1975, Mel's oldest son, Dirk, who'd helped design that mailbox, found 5 bronze cannons. Their markings tied them directly to the Atocha. Cannons meant they were closing in on the ship herself. The Fisher family had never been closer. And then the ocean reminded them what it charges. Days after finding those cannons, on the night of July 20th, 1975, part of the crew was asleep aboard one of their boats, a converted tugboat called the Northwind, anchored right over the search site. In the dark, unnoticed, the boat took on water, and it rolled. Mel's son, Dirk, his young wife, Angel, and a diver named Rick Gage were trapped below deck. They didn't make it out. Dirk was 21 years old. Mel Fisher had chased his dream across an entire ocean, and the ocean had taken his son. Any reasonable person would have stopped right there. Everyone would have understood. But through that heartbreak, Mel made a quiet, iron promise. They would find the Atocha now. They would find it for Dirk. And remember that date, July 20th. Hold on to it, because the ocean wasn't done with this story. As if losing his son wasn't enough, now Mel had to fight a second enemy, on dry land. The moment his finds made headlines, the state of Florida showed up with its hand out, claiming the treasure was theirs and pressuring Mel into a contract, handing over 25% of everything. Mel refused and did what Mel always did. He dug in and fought. The battle ground on for 8 brutal years, bleeding money he didn't have, all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And it raises a question people still argue about. Who actually owns sunken treasure? The person who risks his life and fortune to find it? The government whose waters it sits in? The country that lost it? In this case, Spain. Or does it belong in a museum for everyone? There's no clean answer, and it shapes how every shipwreck is handled to this day. But in 1982, the Supreme Court sided with Mel Fisher. The Atocha, if he could find her, would be his. Now he just had to survive long enough to do it. The next few years were survival mode. Mel was millions in debt, funding a search that had already cost lives and still hadn't hit the jackpot. Investors were nervous. Money was drying up. So how did Mel keep the whole thing afloat? Charm and gold. Mel was a born showman. He'd take a heavy gold chain recovered from a Spanish wreck, real, ancient, gleaming treasure, and drape it around the neck of a potential investor. He'd let them feel the weight of it, hold history in their hands. Suddenly, the dream wasn't a risky bet on paper. It was hanging around their neck. People wrote checks. He even wore one of those chains onto national television. When a host asked what it was worth, Mel grinned that it might pay a couple months of your alimony. That talent is the only reason the search survived to 1985. July 20th, 1985. 10 years, to the day, since the night the ocean took Dirk over that very same stretch of water. Mel's other son, Kane, was captaining a salvage boat called the Dauntless, out over the site. That afternoon, the radio back at Key West headquarters crackled to life with a message that would become legend. Put away the charts. We've found the main pile. The divers went down, and there it was, the reef of silver, over 1,000 bars stacked in the sand, chests overflowing with coins. Gold bars, long heavy gold chains, and emeralds glowing green across the seafloor. 40 tons of gold and silver, around 114,000 silver coins, the famous pieces of 8, thousands of artifacts, an estimated $450 million. The mother lode of the Atocha, lost for 3.5 centuries, was finally in Mel Fisher's hands. 16 years, a fortune spent, his son lost to the very same sea, and the treasure surfaced on the anniversary, to the exact day of the worst day of his life. That morning, for the first time, Mel didn't have to say it out loud. Everyone already knew. Today was the day. But let's talk about those emeralds, because they're one of the wildest parts of the whole story. Divers began pulling up Colombian emeralds by the pound. Rough ones, cut ones, some enormous glittering stones, straight from the famous Muzo mines. And here's where it gets suspicious. According to the Atocha's official cargo manifest, there weren't supposed to be nearly that many emeralds aboard. So where did they come from? A 400-year-old crime. Smuggling. Everything shipped legally back to Spain got taxed by the crown, a hefty cut off the top. So officials and passengers had every reason to sneak valuables aboard off the books to cheat the king. Historians point to old accounts describing large quantities of contraband emeralds, reportedly on the order of 70 pounds, quietly smuggled onto the Atocha, never written on any manifest. Think about that. Those stones sat on the ocean floor for over 350 years. And the moment Fisher's divers found them, they exposed a smuggling operation the smugglers took to their graves. The treasure told on them. Some of those emeralds are so flawless, they're considered among the finest ever recovered from any shipwreck, anywhere. And the Atocha wasn't even the only fortune Mel's team pulled from those waters. Years earlier, while hunting her, they'd stumbled onto her sister ship, the Santa Margarita, sunk in that same 1622 hurricane. In 1980, they brought up around $20 million in gold, silver, and artifacts. For any other treasure hunter on Earth, that's the find of a lifetime. For Mel, it was almost a warm-up. His teams also crossed paths with other wrecks over the years, including hauntingly a sunken slave ship called the Henrietta Marie, which became one of the most important archaeological windows into the transatlantic slave trade ever discovered. Not treasure in gold, treasure in history. Mel Fisher had become the most famous treasure hunter in the world. But he didn't just cash out and vanish. He understood that what he'd raised wasn't only money, it was history. So he took part of his share and, in Key West, built the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum, where anyone can walk in and stand face to face with the actual treasure of the Atocha. And it's not all behind glass. To this day, visitors can pick up a real silver bar from the wreck and feel the cold, dense weight of a 400-year-old fortune in their own hands, alongside gold chains, emeralds, coins, and cannons from a ship that sank in 1622. But here's the detail that keeps this story alive. Literally, they never found all of it. Experts believe Mel's crew recovered only about half of the Atocha's total treasure. Somewhere out there, still buried, is the ship's stern castle, thought to hold even more gold and the rarest of those Muzo emeralds. Hundreds of silver bars are still unaccounted for. More cannons, more coins. So decades later, divers are still searching that exact patch of ocean. They call it the Bank of Spain because it just keeps paying out. Even in recent years, crews have kept surfacing new finds. Gold, silver, emeralds, artifacts, one dive at a time. The hunt Mel Fisher started never actually ended. Mel passed away in 1998, but his obsession outlived him. His family and crews kept diving, kept searching, kept believing. Because somewhere off the Florida Keys, on a boat over that sunken Spanish galleon, someone is still waking up before dawn, looking out at the water, and thinking the exact same three words that drove a chicken farmer from Indiana to the greatest treasure ever found. Today's the day. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.